Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Greg Alexander about the question many companies are asking. Why hire employees when you can rent experts on demand? Greg Alexander, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thanks, Jonathan. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. I'm excited for this conversation. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. And as we were preparing for this episode, you posed a really interesting question. Why hire employees when you can just rent experts on demand? And there are so many really cool platforms to be able to do that. So we're going to explore that question together today. We're going to talk about leveraging human capital in a variety of ways through traditional hiring, but also through contingent workforce and contract workers, gig economy workers. There are so many really great ways to tap into the human capital that's out there in the labor market and to ultimately help our organization succeed. So that'll be our focus today. As we get started, I wanted to share Greg's bio with everybody. Greg Alexander adds value to members by providing advice, intellectual property, and funding. Prior to starting Collective 54, which he'll talk about here in a moment, Greg accomplished what members are trying to accomplish. He started, scaled, and sold a management consulting firm for 9 figures in 10 years. In addition to this role, Greg is the Chief Investment Officer of Capital 54 and is the founder of Lumini. Greg is the author of 3 books, with the most recent being an Amazon.com bestseller titled The Boutique: How to Start, Scale, and Sell a Professional Services Firm. Also, Greg's podcast with host Sean McGinnis, is that how you say his name? McGinnis is the most listened to show for owners of boutique professional service firms who are trying to grow, scale, and exit. Wonderful. So you are now flipping the roles and on the other side of the microphone, so to speak. It's great to have you on my podcast today. Before we launch into our conversation, anything else you would like to share with listeners by way of your background or personal context?
No, I think you captured it really well. I mean, what I do these days is I invest in professional services firms. You mentioned 2 of them, Lumini Network and Collective 54. I do that through my family office called Capital 54. So after 30 years of being an operator, I'm now an investor, and I'm on the other side of the desk, and it's a wonderful journey, and I look forward to sharing what I've learned so far.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. It's super interesting to me, as I was reading through your bio and learning a little bit more about you and your background, this scaling of a consulting firm and then selling it. I mean, that's a tremendous thing. And many people kind of have that dream of trying to do that themselves. So I would love to hear just a little bit more about that as we get into the topic for today. So why don't we start there? How did you get into this world? How did you get into the consulting work? How, why, and when did you, decide to sell? And then let's talk more about the, traditional employee versus quote unquote renting experts on demand.
Sure. So it's my opinion that we're living in the golden era of the professional services industry. Now, why do I feel that way? Well, the pace of change in corporations these days is just incredible, and digital technologies and all of its forms and versions is disrupting everybody's business. I mean, what is a priority today becomes a commodity tomorrow, and then something comes out of left field. And we can just look at the marketing world, the digital marketing world. I mean, every day there seems to be a new platform that pops up that attracts advertising eyeballs and advertising dollars. So if you're a corporation, traditionally you were executing your business plan, you would hire employees. And that would mean searching for them, recruiting them, onboarding them, training them, making them productive, and then retaining them, which can take months, if not years. Well, if the rate of change is happening so quickly, how do you stay ahead of the curve? So today you hire somebody off a job spec, and the job spec is obsolete in 12 months. What do you do? So this is what's causing the gig economy to move into high-end white-collar work, professional services work, unlike we've never seen before. Traditionally, the gig economy has been things like, DoorDash, Uber, etc., but it's moving very rapidly into the professional services space. So more and more companies are doing things like outsourcing all or part of IT services, marketing and advertising, design, legal, accounting, supply chain, you name it. You pick your domain. It seems to be more advantageous for corporations these days to rent expertise on an as-needed basis. And this is what's creating this golden era for professional services firms. There's so much demand. So if you're a professional services firm provider, it's never been this good. And this is the opportunity, a once in a lifetime opportunity, I believe, to scale your firm beyond what has previously been doable, for lack of a better term, and maybe someday, like I did, exit your firm and change your life forever.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and I agree. I mean, I think the time is right in terms of the gig economy. We've seen an upward trajectory of people in that space for quite a while, and it's just been accelerated over the past 18 months, in large part due to the pandemic, and just people getting more comfortable with contingent global diverse workforce, working remotely. And so now, there's just all these platforms that can connect people, where you can find the work that you need. In fact, I just rented some design work just the other day. That I don't have an in-house designer. I do, kind of the basic stuff myself, but I needed something a little bit more professional, high end. And so, there's great platforms out there to find people who can just do that for you. I don't need to have someone on staff all the time. And it's economies of scale. It provides them flexibility. People in the gig economy love it because they have the flexibility to do what they love on their own terms. They're not beholden to any particular employer. Employers and businesses love it because they have more flexibility, rather than having, being, I hate to even say it this way, but more hamstrung by kind of a traditional employee relationship. But it's certainly harder, right, when you have an employee, to have that flexibility. And so it really can be a win-win.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And we're seeing that everywhere. And that's why, again, I think it's a wonderful time to be in the professional services space. But now, how do you maximize that opportunity? How do you grow your firm? How do you scale your firm? How do you sell your firm at some point down the road, if that's what you want to do, for the right price, at the right terms, and in the right way? And so it presents a whole new set of challenges for your listeners and watchers that are in the professional services space. The days of running a nice little lifestyle business are going away. It's about scale now, because that's how much demand there really is.
Yeah. And so, let's talk a little bit more about the pros and cons of these different approaches to tapping into human capital. Because there really are pros and cons to each approach. What do you see as, when you ask yourself this question, in the work that you've done and working with other people as well, when you ask yourself this question, or you're talking with other clients about this similar type of question, when would you say someone should lean towards like actually hiring that part-time or that full-time person as an employee of the organization versus going out to find people on a contract basis, to do the work that you need done?
The metaphor that I like to use that will be a good way to answer that question is, think of the home building metaphor, right? When you have a construction project, you hire a general contractor. And the general contractor kind of owns the strategy, so to speak. Gets the plans from the architect who designed the home and says, okay, here's the project. We're going to spend the next 12 months building this home, and it's going to be a modern contemporary home on an acre lot, and it's going to be 1 story with 6 bedrooms, et cetera, et cetera. So the general contractor is in charge. And I believe that employers should have their, so to speak, general contractor for their function. But then when it comes time to farming out the work, so back to my house analogy, I probably don't have a plumber on staff. I might not have an electrician on staff. I might not have a landscaper on staff. I might not have a roofer on staff. I'm going to farm that stuff out to my subcontractors, if you will. Now, why am I doing that? Because I don't need a roofer on staff full time. I need a roofer when I need a roofer. And I want to have a relationship with a high quality roofer that can do the job on time, on spec, on budget. So that's what I think should happen, in my opinion. I think corporations are gonna own the strategy, if you will. They're going to deploy an army of high quality, highly capable general contractors. And the core skill of those general contractors is to be able to source, hire, make productive, and maintain a relationship, an ongoing relationship with these subcontractors. Because you're not going to use them once, you're going to use them multiple times. So that's the real skill. So if you're somebody inside of a corporation listening to this podcast right now, your new requirement, your new core capability is your ability to have these relationships with this talent that you can rent from time to time, because there is some sourcing cost. If you're looking for a needle in the haystack all the time, that gets frustrating. So when you find your needle in the haystack, so to speak, make sure you treat that needle very well. You build a relationship with that needle so that you can rely on that needle down the road when you have a need that's similar to the one you have today.
Yeah, that's a really, really important point. And I think it's one that's often lost on people when they think of the gig economy and just, working with a contract worker for whatever. They see them as kind of disposable oftentimes. And what you're describing, I think, is exactly the right approach in contrast to the wrong approach, which is, you got to treat people with dignity and respect. You got to treat them as people who are valued. Now, obviously, if they didn't work out, if they're not the diamond in the rough, and you don't want to use them again, that's one thing. But when you find someone who's good, guess what? Other people are looking for really great people too. And there's going to be hyper competition to be able to use that person in the future. And so you better treat them well. Otherwise, why would they continue to work with you? Like, there's this assumption, I think, a lot of times in corporations that we're throwing breadcrumbs out to these starving people who need us. And I mean, it's true. Like, people who hang their own shingle, they're looking, trying to drum up business, and they're trying to find opportunities. But those who are really good, those who are really successful, they have plenty of work, and they don't need us as much as we might need them, or at least that's how we should approach it. And so treat them well, treat them like we would any other client, any other employee. And if we don't, we can really find ourselves in a hard place really quick. The next time we need a quick turnaround on a project, and we need that really good person we can trust and who we know is going to deliver quality, and we don't have it because they're booked out a month, and we can't get in, or whatever the case may be, and we have to end up going out to someone else, trying someone else new, and it may not work. So let's remember our good people and treat them accordingly.
Yeah, I agree. In this approach, I guess we'll call it the gig economy approach, the general contractor approach. We've been living with this approach for a long, long, long time in other domains, and it's worked for us. But for some reason in corporate America, it's relatively new. And I agree with you. I think the pandemic has put it on the plate. But let's talk about your relationship with your doctor. A doctor is a professional service. The medical practice is a professional service, right? And you go to your doctor, and let's say it's your first visit, and you establish a relationship, and the doctor runs some tests and starts collecting some information. One day you wake up and you've been with the same physician for 15 years. Now, do you see that doctor every day? I hope not, because if you do, that means you're ill, right? The reality is maybe you see a doctor once a year for your annual checkup, or maybe twice a year if something happens along the way. But you build that relationship, and it's a rental relationship, for lack of a better term. You don't have your doctor on staff, on your payroll 24/7. No, you use your doctor when you need him or her. Now, and you build up a relationship with this doctor. This doctor collects tribal knowledge about you, your medical history, what's ailing you, et cetera. And over time, it's a mutually beneficial relationship. It's good for you, the patient, because you're getting high quality care, high quality service. And it's great for the doctor because he's got repeat business. He's got a happy customer that keeps coming back. So that's been going on for how long? Maybe since the beginning of mankind, right? So why is this so foreign concept in corporate America? It's the same thing. And I think as the knowledge economy continues to dominate, as software eats the world, as they like to say, this is going to be the way it is.
I'm excited to announce the publication of my new book from HCI Press, The Alchemy of Truly Remarkable Leadership: Ordinary, Everyday Actions that Produce Extraordinary Results. Consider how the nature of work has shifted over the past 50 years. With increased globalization, rapid technological advancement, and the shift in economic composition, the average job of today looks very different than the average job of 50 years ago. What will the jobs and organizations of tomorrow look like? Moreover, what does this all mean for organizational leaders? What are the core competencies and capabilities of organizations and their leadership that are prepared for continued disruption and geopolitical and socioeconomic shifts? Regardless of what the future holds, increasingly, leaders need to be socially minded, data-driven, decisive, champions of talent, and disruptors of the traditional notions of leadership, teams, organizations, and work. The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership will help you to explore your own leadership competencies and capabilities and consider ways to apply and implement them into your workplace and personal life. Yeah. And so, I mean, if that is the way it's going to be, and in my mind, it's just going to be more and more that way. Like with you look at the trajectory of the gig economy over the last 15 years, and it's close to an exponential curve. And I haven't seen any data post-pandemic to see like what the jump was during the pandemic, but I expect that it jumped even further. And so in the coming 10 to 15 years, I mean, I suspect this is just going to grow dramatically. And we know that there's quite a bit of research on, young millennials and Gen Z individuals in the workforce who, disproportionately are leaning towards the more flexible approach to work, not in the, they're not looking for their traditional careers, the traditional jobs. A lot of them want to be digital nomads. They want to go wherever they want, when they want, which means, it kind of necessitates this gig economy kind of an approach. So many of them want it that way. More and more organizations are recognizing the benefit of it. So we're going to need to learn how to do this better. The general contract kind of framing, I think, is a really excellent way to frame it, because what that means is we need people with, if I'm in a big corporation and I want to leverage, renting, quote unquote, renting experts, I need to have the skill set to be able to do that effectively. Now, in certain arenas, there's been people doing that for ages, but like you said, in corporate America, that's not as common of an approach. So we need people, we need to train up people and develop the skills to be able to do that effectively, to manage those relationships. And it can be complex. I mean, if I'm a manager and I have a team of, 5-10 people, it's hard enough for me to be able to like manage relationships and keep track of what everyone's doing and help them to be productive. But now I'm more of a general contractor role, being the internal expert. Now I need to farm out work to people. I might have dozens of people that I utilize. And that adds a layer of complexity. Maybe complexity is the name of the game in business generally these days. I think we just need to be more and more comfortable with more and more complexity, but certainly the type of role that we're talking about, that's not something that most people have had a lot of experience with. And so we better start to figure it out and learn how to do it really well. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, let me share some stats with you that we've collected over at Collective 54 that confirm everything that you're saying. So at the end of 2019, so a little dated here, but 2020 was a unique year, let's call it that. There were approximately 1.5 million professional services firms just in the United States. These firms employed 9 million people, and there was $2 trillion spent in professional services in that year, 2019. And the organic growth rate is 5% per year. These are stats according to IBIS World Reports, which is a leading market research firm. So that makes it one of the biggest segments in the economy. And that's just US figures. If you take those figures to the other parts of the world, the numbers even get even more dramatic, because many of other parts of the world are leverageable, global, decentralized workforces by design from the get-go. I mean, if you just think of the IT services sector in India as an example. So, it's here. It really is. And it's no longer a new thing. So what I like to focus on now is what a wonderful opportunity this is, right? So if you're a professional services firm serving corporate America in this way, my gosh, I mean, talk about a once in a lifetime opportunity. I mean, it's such a demand rich environment, so the question for your listeners that might be in that field as the service provider, how do you capitalize on this opportunity?
Yeah. And capitalization, I think really is the key point there. I'm trying to think, as I've had conversations with so many different executives and professionals over the past year or so, there's not very many that seem, every now and then I'll talk to someone who doesn't seem to get it, but like 99% of everyone I'm talking to, they get it. They understand what you're saying. They're just not quite sure how to get there. They're not quite sure how to go and implement it and to do it effectively. And then there's the rare person who's just kind of putting their head in the sand and just trying to pretend like things aren't changing. And I'm like, things are never going back to the way they were. I'm sorry. Regardless of what your preference is, but yeah, the implementation piece, I think, is really the challenge. And it really does present an incredible opportunity for those who can figure out how to do it right. I have a couple people that I'm close with, who have been like going like gangbusters this last year because they're tapping into exactly what you're talking about. And the amount of success that they're having, it's kind of mind boggling. And I'm slightly jealous, frankly, of how well they've been doing. But, good on them for finding the need and being able to tap into it and to really find their niche where they can help out. And that's what we all need to try to do if we're going to be relevant, right, in the future of work. And we can't just assume that things are going to be like they've always been in the past. That's naive, certainly. And it's not, it's not sustainable. Strategically, it's not sustainable. And we're going to find ourselves behind the 8 ball, as we're, trying to catch up to these trends and catch up to what other firms are seeing and actively trying to do and, implement right now.
I had a conversation with a member of Collective 54 the other day that was both enlightening and highly entertaining. Let me share that briefly with you. So this question of how do I take advantage of this opportunity? So let's say I am a professional services firm and I hear this podcast and I realize there's so much demand out there, and how do I participate in it? So one of the members said to me 2 things: avoid paying dumb taxes and buy idiot insurance, which I laughed at hysterically. And he referred to Collective 54 and its membership as idiot insurance. At first, as the founder of Collective 54, I was offended by that. But after you explained it, I realized it was a term of affection. So what Collective 54 is a peer-to-peer network. So you become a member and you have access to people like you and with firms like yours and jobs like yours, et cetera. And you can learn a tremendous amount, by talking to your peers. Hey, Joe, I'm running into this problem. What did you do? And Joe might have an answer, that type of thing. So he says you join these peer networks, and there's many of them. There's Vistage and EO and YPO. I mean, in mastermind groups, this is not a novel thing. And you join these networks to avoid paying dumb taxes. Dumb taxes meaning mistakes that I could avoid. And the dues that you pay to these organizations are idiot insurance. You pay a small amount of money every month to have access to your peers so that you can pick up the phone and say, hey, Joe, what are you doing with XYZ? So I think, to your question, how do you figure this out? I think access to a highly curated network of peers is super important. And because of technology, I mean, Jonathan, look at I'm in Aspen, Colorado right now. Where are you?
I'm south of Salt Lake City. I wish I was in Aspen.
Right. So, but here we are because of technology. To network with peers used to require geographic proximity. It no longer does. I'm in Colorado and you're in Utah, and we're networking and collaborating today. So if you can plug into these networks, in my opinion, that's a silver bullet. That answers your question of, how do I figure this out? Well, jump into a network with others just like you who may have already figured it out. Don't pay any dumb taxes and buy some idiot insurance.
Yeah. And I mean, this is a new evolving thing, right? So there's no like handbook on how to do this. I suppose I could probably go search Amazon and someone's probably written something. So maybe there is like a handbook, but I mean, really, this is something that we're figuring out on the fly. We're building the plane while we're flying it. And so, yeah, get connected with other people who are also trying to figure it out. It's a mutually beneficial opportunity for people when we have those types of connections like you're doing. So I think that's a tremendous resource. Well, Greg, we could go on and on and on. I think there's so much to unpack here, but I'm mindful of the time. I recognize that you'll need to get going to your next thing. But before we close today, I did want to make sure I gave you a chance to share with our listeners how they can get connected with you, how they can find out more about your firm, how they can leverage it, like utilize it more to benefit them and their organizations. And then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Sure. I appreciate the opportunity. So I would direct your listeners and watchers to a website, collective54.com, and that's the number 54. And that's a membership organization for founders of professional services firms that are trying to grow, scale, and exit their firms. So that would be the first place I would go. The second thing I would do is I would go to Amazon and buy my book, hopefully. It's called The Boutique, How to Start, Scale, and Sell a Professional Services Firm. And then also you can look me up on LinkedIn at Greg Alexander at collective54.com, and you can connect with me there. And I love getting that outreach and meeting new people. So, don't feel as if sending me a request on LinkedIn is intrusive on my privacy. Quite the opposite. So I would encourage everybody to do that as well.
Perfect. I encourage listeners to reach out, to get connected, to find out more about Collective 54, more about Greg and his team and the work that they do and how they can help you. Greg, before we close, any final word on the topic for today?
I guess my final word would be, you at the start of the call reviewed my bio. And I was somebody like you. I started, scaled, and sold a firm for 9 figures in 10 years. And if you're trying to do that, I encourage you to go for it. I truly believe with every ounce of my being that we're in the golden era of the professional services industry. And as they say, make hay when the sun's shining, and the sun is shining very bright right now. So if you're out there and you're listening to this and you're looking for a little inspiration, hopefully my words of encouragement can serve that purpose. And give it all you got, because this is a once in a lifetime chance.
Wonderful. Thank you, Greg. It's been a pleasure. Again, I encourage everyone to reach out, get connected. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.
We are excited about the launch of HCI's new magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine designed to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We will be publishing issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Check out the first issue and let us know what you think. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week. Check out our new weekly LinkedIn newsletter, Alchemizing Human Capital, exploring industry trends via original research and interviews with executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We look forward to having you join us.